In 1997, Squaresoft released their biggest game yet, Final Fantasy VII. Thanks to strong sales from the title and the popularity of the PlayStation, Japanese role-playing games entered into the mainstream of gaming in the West. Squaresoft leapt at the opportunity to create more role-playing games now that they had a sizable market beyond Japan, and that meant the Chrono series had a chance to shine once again. This is the story of the Chrono series. In this part, we'll be taking a look at Chrono Cross, the PlayStation classic and final game released in the Chrono series. We'll also be discussing the legacy of these games in the modern era of gaming and what the future might hold for the long-dormant series. Early concepts for a sequel to Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation began in 1996, when Tetsuya Takashi, the graphics director for Chrono Trigger, and his wife, Kaori Tanaka, the graphic designer at Square, submitted a proposed story for Final Fantasy VII. Executives at Square found the story to be too dark for the Final Fantasy franchise. Concepts for this project were then shifted to a sequel for Chrono Trigger. However, this title was eventually released as its own separate game known as Xenogears. Xenogears was developed over a 2-year time span and brought on many veterans from the Chrono Trigger development team. Masato Kato served as a scriptwriter for the title, and Yasunori Mitsuda provided the soundtrack for the game. Xenogears released in 1998 in both Japan and North America. With development complete, Masato Kato was approached by Square once again to dive into the world of Chrono to create a fully realized sequel for the PlayStation. Chrono Cross was born. For this new project, Kato served as both the writer and director of the title, similar to his role with Radical Dreamers. Thanks in part to Radical Dreamers' rushed development, Kato felt the game was left in an unfinished state and wished to return to the premise of the game. Notably, Kato wanted to return to the characters of Kid and Surge, who would become the main protagonists for the title. Both characters received much more fleshed out designs when compared to their Satellaview counterparts. Full development of the title began in 1998 with a massive team behind it. Around 80 different people worked on the project at its peak, with an additional 20 cutscene artists developing full motion videos for the game, and roughly 100 quality assurance testers. Yasunori Mitsuda returned once again to compose the soundtrack. Mitsuda returned to many of the songs from Radical Dreamers when working on Chrono Cross, while developing plenty of new songs to go with the game. For Chrono Cross, there was a lot of pressure on the development team to live up to the lofty standards the Dream Team of Chrono Trigger had set. Rather than develop the title as a full sequel to the Super Nintendo original, Kato and his team set out to develop a new game set within the world of Chrono. Development strayed from Chrono Trigger as time went on, as concepts like time travel were dropped. Instead, Chrono Cross centered its story around parallel worlds, and the similar events that take place in between the two. Throughout the player's journey, they would travel between their homeworld and an alternative world where the protagonist Surge had died several years earlier. A new combat system was developed for the game as well. Chrono Trigger's variation of the active time battle system that was popular in many Square's RPGs of the time was replaced with a new combat system that utilized a stamina bar and limited use elements during battle. This new combat system also discarded a traditional level up system, instead offering stat buffs after defeating certain boss characters during the story. Kato's stated reasoning for this new combat system was to avoid repetitive battling and grinding, which were seen in many role-playing games during the PlayStation era. He also likened the system to that of a card game. Each new element a player equipped to a character was like a card in a deck, and it was the player's best goal to create the best characters they could with their finite resources. After a year and a half of development, Chrono Cross released on the PlayStation on November 18, 1999 in Japan. A demo of the game was made available in the region with the purchase of the title Legend of Mana, which released a few months earlier in July of 1999. The release came a few weeks after the PlayStation port of Chrono Trigger as well. The title was a major hit in Japan, although it sold significantly less than Chrono Trigger did in the region. A total of roughly 850,000 copies of the game were sold in the region, less than half of Chrono Trigger's 2 million in 1995. Critical reception was once again strong, with reviewing outlet Famitsu awarding the game a 36 out of 40. For the North American release, Squaresoft chose Richard Honeywood to localize the game over a period of 3 months. Honeywood previously led the localization of Xenogears, making him a good fit for the PlayStation title. Chrono Cross released in North America on August 15, 2000. The game was published by Square Electronic Arts, a joint venture between Square and EA to publish Square's titles in North America. The North American release was well received, despite the game coming out towards the end of the PlayStation's lifecycle in the region. IGN awarded the game a 9.7 out of 10, praising the game's story and characters. GameStop awarded the game a rare 10 out of 10, and gave it their Console Game of the Year award for the year 2000. Fans were impressed by the game as well, with North American gamers purchasing 650,000 copies of the game. While many praised the gorgeous graphics, fun gameplay, and interesting story, many felt let down by the title's lack of similarities to Chrono Trigger, despite being billed as a sequel to the game. Europe would once again miss out on the Chrono series. Although the title was trademarked with the European Union, Chrono Cross was never released in the region. Like Radical Dreamers before it, Chrono Cross follows the story of Surge, a teenager from a small village who gets warped to another world. This alternative world is similar to his own, but after talking with people from his village, Surge realizes a horrible truth. In this alternate world, Surge died 10 years ago, splitting reality into a world where he lived and a world where he died. Surge is then joined by Kid, a young female thief, and many other characters as he attempts to return to his own world while also getting caught up in the schemes of Lynx, a cat-like demi-human who wishes to control the frozen flame. The world of Chrono Cross takes place in the El Nido archipelago. The series of islands host various cities, villages, monsters, and 6 mythical dragons, with each dragon representing an attack element within the game. El Nido is much smaller than the RPG worlds of its era, consisting of a few dozen locations to explore during the journey. Unlike in Chrono Trigger, where the player had an option of up to 7 characters to choose from when creating their party by the end of the game, Chrono Cross boasts 45 different playable characters, although not all characters are recruitable during a single playthrough. Chrono Cross offered many of the same replay options as Chrono Trigger and Radical Dreamers, with multiple endings available depending on how the player completed the game. Most of the endings are exclusive to the game's New Game Plus mode. Despite being marketed as a sequel, Chrono Cross shared little in common with its predecessor. With new themes, characters, and combat, you could easily mistake Chrono Cross as a completely separate series. Like Radical Dreamers, many of the references to Chrono Trigger are hidden deep into the game's story. Characters from the past game did make appearances, and the story of Chrono Trigger was fleshed out further, but by no means is Chrono Cross Chrono Trigger 2, which was part of Masato Kato's stated goal for the title. Following the release of Chrono Cross, no new titles have been created within the Chrono series. A third title in the series was rumored starting in 2001 when Square trademarked the name Chrono Break. The title, presumably for the PlayStation 2, was never announced, and the trademark lapsed in 2003. Masato Kato left Square Enix shortly after the release of Chrono Cross, which should help explain why the series was never explored further. He worked on the MMORPG Final Fantasy XI for the company before leaving to become a freelance worker in the game development industry. Yasunori Mitsuda also left Square, although he did so in 1998 before the release of Chrono Cross. Akira Toriyama and Yuji Horii have both continued to work on the Dragon Quest franchise, while Hironobu Sakaguchi left Square in the early 2000s to create his own game development studio. Chrono Cross has only seen one release outside of its original PlayStation release. In 2011, Chrono Cross released on the PlayStation Network's line of PlayStation 1 classics. Chrono Trigger was released under the same banner that year, as well as on the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console. Chrono Trigger continues to carry the banner for the series today. In 2011, mobile ports of the title were released for iOS and Android devices. In 2018, a PC port of the game based on the mobile versions was released through Steam. While initially panned by gamers for being a rushed and lazy port, later updates have made the game more in line with the versions seen on home consoles and handhelds. With Chrono Trigger being one of my favorite games of all time, it's a shame that the series was never given a proper chance to join the likes of Square's other classic franchises. It seems like Square's only concern with these titles is keeping the prestige and legacy of Chrono Trigger alive through occasional re-releases. But even that seems somewhat untrue. As of the release of this video, Chrono Trigger is not available on any current consoles, and Square has not indicated that it will be released on them or any future platforms. Chrono Cross has it worse, with most gamers' best option for playing the game being the PlayStation 3, a system that was discontinued over 5 years ago. Even 20 years after Chrono Cross's release, the title is not available for purchase in any European markets, leaving players with no choice other than piracy. Despite these obstacles, I would take it upon yourself to experience these classic games, including Radical Dreamers. The world of Chrono is a fascinating one, with plenty of twists and turns to keep you engaged. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Chrono Cross, I still had a good time playing it and challenging all the game's various bosses. Radical Dreamers is a fantastic piece of media that was almost lost to time, and Chrono Trigger, well, I still love it to this day. Thanks for watching. This was the final part in a series about the story of the Chrono series. If you missed any previous episodes, be sure to check them out. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share it on your favorite social media sites. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to catch the next video whenever it releases, and let me know what you would like to see covered in future videos down in the comments below. And once again, thank you for watching.